Revenge always sounded like a dirty word, something whispered in the shadows of a life you'd rather not discuss. But when you're a child, ignored by the very people meant to love you unconditionally, it becomes a form of survival, a way to scream without making a sound. Your parents only remember you exist when their bank accounts are low. It started as a joke, but over time, it twisted into a bitter truth, an unshakable mantra. Every phone call was a predictable charade. My mom's syrupy tone, my dad's brusque demands, all perfumed in cheap insincerity before the inevitable ask for money. Usually, I'd dodge these calls, let them drown in voicemail limbo. But today, something pushed me to pick up. Their routine inquiry into my life was thin camouflage for what they really wanted. As they spoke, I felt a familiar stir of resentment uncoil inside me, tired of years spent parrying their reminder of why they reached out. For the first time, I planned to disrupt their rhythm, to give an answer so unexpected it would shatter their self-serving choreography, and, finally, free me from this relentless cycle of taking. The phone vibrated insistently on the coffee table, its tremor slicing through the fragile peace of my afternoon like a sudden paper cut. I knew without looking that it was them. Their number was practically etched into my mind's eye, the digits a chain binding me to a past I'd never agreed to shoulder. When I finally picked up, the silence stretched for a heartbeat too long, as if they were caught off guard that I had answered. "Darling," my mother's voice burst through, dripping with an overdone warmth that could never fully thaw the frost between us. I clenched my jaw. The false affection stung, an old familiar betrayal that seemed almost ritualistic by now. "We've been thinking so much about you," she purred, and the words, hollow and rehearsed, slid around my skin like an unwelcome caress. I swallowed an incredulous snort. Thinking about me? Or rather, thinking about what I could give. There was a faint rustling in the background, the sound of my father taking the line, his voice a rough grumble. "Yeah, we've been worried." The words limped heavily, weighed down by a lifetime of insincerity and unrealized expectations. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Worried, but never present. Concerned, but always at a distance. "How are you, sweetheart? You sound tired." My mother again, seizing on the moment's pause as permission. There was something in the way she spoke that always seemed to twist tight around my lungs. The familiar push and pull, the desperate dance of need and withholding. "I'm fine," I managed, each syllable a reluctant escape from the fortress I'd built within. "Just busy with work." I deliberately left it vague, an open-ended line that wouldn't encourage further inquiries. They never cared much for details unless they involved dollar signs. And then it came, the pivot so abrupt yet expected, like clockwork in a dysfunctional machine. My mother sighed, a performative exhale that quivered theatrically over the receiver. "It's been tough for us lately," she began, and I closed my eyes, picturing the script she was surely reading from. "Your father's health, the bills." I felt a familiar constriction in my chest, a tightening born from too many years of held breath and withheld words. "We were hoping," she continued, voice now a whisper tinged with strategic vulnerability. This was the moment she played her ace, the silent expectation that once anchored their calls to reality. The plea masked as familial concern. The room's shadows seemed to darken around me, and my grip on the phone became a lifeline as I shifted my weight, leaning forward on the couch, eyes fixed on nothing. I can't keep doing this," I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips. Yet each one felt like liberation, like a gentle push against the tide. On the other end, there was a beat of silence. The rupture, however minor, was palpable. The pattern had been acknowledged, if not broken. I could feel something within me waking, and I clung to that fragile flame, knowing it was just the beginning. It's late in the evening, and the shadows spill over the kitchen like ink. That same familiar dull ache wraps around me, tugging at memories I've long tried to bury. I stand alone, peering out the window, the twilight reflecting a twisted tapestry of days I said yes, when my whole being screamed no. I remember the first time I let their words batter down the fragile walls I'd built around myself. It's almost embarrassing how quickly I folded, surrendering to their demands like they had some gravity I couldn't defy. I was younger, naive, but I still carried that harsh guilt, like a sharp stone lodged in my chest. There were nights, countless nights, where I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the echo of their dismissals and the void of silence that followed after. "Be there for us," they'd say, as if my existence was merely an extension of their own, and in my eagerness or desperation to belong, I let it happen. The old house we lived in back then, it was a fortress of neglect. I'd wander through the shadows of forgotten rooms, each one a monument to the absence of their supposed love. My gut twists, recalling my younger self standing in the cold dimness of the hallway, trying to swallow down the lump of isolation that threatened to choke me. Their laughter, jangled and tinny from the other room, always seemed to reach me too late, or maybe it never truly reached me at all. But even in my compliance, there was rebellion simmering beneath. In those quiet, muffled corners of my heart, I made promises. Silent oaths to never be reduced to their puppet strings again. I'd whisper them into the pillows, feeling the warmth of my breath against my cheek, as if trying to convince myself I could manifest strength from words alone. Those promises felt solid in the dark, but by daylight, they would bleed away, washed out by the obligations I somehow couldn't escape. I remember one night, vividly. I'd just turned 18, and a fresh layer of snow blanketed the outside world. They needed something, money, probably, or maybe just another thread they could pull to unravel me. My pulse quickened at the expectation of refusal, at the daring thought of reclaiming my agency. Yet, as the words formed like a barrier on my lips, I swallowed them, my voice drowned in the sea of guilt and the pressure of belonging. "Sure," I'd said, a single syllable steeped in reluctant surrender. Now, those echoes reverberate around me, sharper and more insistent. My hands press into the countertop, grounding myself against the resentment bubbling up, unfiltered and raw. I draw a breath. Their absence was a hollow ache that I filled with my own silent promises to never let them reduce me again. But those promises often bled away with the shame of compliance. And yet, here I stand, on the precipice, knowing that decision looms ahead, the weight of the past pressing insistently upon my every thought. I felt the heaviness in the air the moment the front door clicked shut behind me. It was that kind of oppressive silence that spoke of expectation, the kind that fell around us whenever they weren't satisfied, and that day, I swear it was thicker than ever. They sat across from me, in the middle of the living room, their eyes like twin interrogators under the dim light. "We really need you to reconsider." The words dripped with that familiar manipulative sweetness, the kind that used to wrap around my mind and drag me down. "But not today. Not anymore. I've thought about it." My voice was steady, but I could feel that old trace of anxiety lurking beneath the surface. It lurked like a shadow, threatening to pull my resolve back into the dark. But I wasn't about to let it win, not this time. They leaned forward, intent, desperate, trying to bridge the distance that had been slowly growing between us for so long. "It's important, you know. It's for the family." The way they said family was like a velvet-covered dagger, always wielded at moments when they wanted the most from me. I glanced around, focusing on the small details, the worn sofa fabric, the fraying edges of the old carpet, anything to steady myself. I drew a slow breath, imagining it as a bubble in my chest inflating with every ounce of strength I could muster. "And what about what's important to me?" I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper but ringing with unspoken conviction. "Oh, come on. Don't be selfish." They snapped back, the sweetness vanishing, replaced by impatience, the mask slipping away. "We've done so much for you." Their words cut, as they always had. But now, standing on this precipice of change, their sharpness only fueled me. The old me might have recoiled, might have pleaded for forgiveness, but today was different. I felt it all rising up inside me. Every muted objection I'd swallowed, every silent scream I'd buried. "No more," I thought, as the frustration bubbled over, my hands clenching into tight fists, nails biting into my palms. My heart pounded, a war drum in my chest fueling the defiance. "No more," I repeated aloud, my voice gaining strength, slicing through their protests like a long, overdue liberation. They blinked, momentarily stunned, as if they couldn't quite reconcile this new person with the one they had always controlled. But I couldn't stop now. Every word was a crack in the chains that bound me, a step out of the shadows. "I'm done," I said again, louder, steadier, reveling in the raw, electric sensation of finally standing up, fully, for myself. The air felt lighter, the tension breaking, and for the first time, I saw the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. That was my moment, my turning point, and with it came the unshakable realization that I would no longer be the person they expected me to be. Not ever again. Their stunned silence was more eloquent than any retort, leaving me with the harsh clarity of what I had finally dared to do. I stood there, feeling like an exposed nerve, raw and throbbing under the fluorescent kitchen light. My parents sat on the other side of the table, their eyes wide, mouths slightly open as if words had simply gotten clogged up somewhere between the mind and the tongue. I could hear the ticking of the clock, an absurdly loud metronome marking the most significant pause of my life. The room felt like it was spinning slowly, and I had this strange urge to burst into laughter, the absurdity of having shifted the roles in this all-too-familiar script we kept performing. The ground beneath us wasn't solid anymore, and for the first time, I sensed they might be feeling as lost as I had all those years. Mom's hand rose, a phantom twitch, reaching for the cigarettes she kept in the drawer by the window, her usual crutch in moments of stress. But she stopped halfway, as if realizing that the habitual escape would no longer work this time. Her fingers curled into a fist and then relaxed into her lap again. I watched these tiny gestures, the crumble of defenses. A kaleidoscope of emotions flickered across her face, something caught between maternal instinct and the shock of seeing me as someone unfamiliar, someone she had to contend with as an equal, rather than a child to be managed or corrected. Dad cleared his throat, the sound harsh and grating in the stillness. We didn't know you felt this way, he said, his voice as fragile and uncertain as a glass on the edge of a table. I nodded, a single slow descent and return, feeling the weight of what I'd let out hanging between us. I didn't know either, I confessed, surprising myself with the honesty of it. The words tasted strange, like something forbidden, yet they were undeniable now, retracing our paths back to somewhere new. Their eyes were on me, searching, measuring the distance they hadn't realized had grown between us. In all the chaos, the arguments swirling around responsibilities and decisions, they had missed it, or maybe I had hidden it too well, concealing it even from myself. But here we were, stripped down, the wreckage clear as day around us. The silence stretched again, softer this time, a different kind of silence. Not one of accusation, but the tentative beginning of understanding. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm I felt yawning wide, but my hands remained at my sides. I wasn't sure how to navigate this strange new landscape we found ourselves in. The clock ticked on, marking a new rhythm for us. They knew I wouldn't retreat back into the shadows, and I understood this was just the beginning, the first fragile step into the unknown. There was no going back, only forward. Freedom and solitude hung in the balance, each carrying a different kind of weight as I pondered the severed ties. The silence of the room was oppressive, filled with the buzzing quiet that takes on a life of its own in absence of distraction. My heartbeat was a stubborn drum, reminding me that I was still here, still whole, yet marked by what I'd done. I moved to the window where the streetlights bled orange onto the sidewalk, casting accusatory shadows that seemed to shrink and swell as passerbys drifted unknowingly below. My reflection caught in the glass was blurry, indistinct, like someone I should recognize but couldn't quite place. I pressed my forehead against the cool pane, seeking solace in the unfeeling cold. An unexpected thrill coursed through me, the realization of having stood my ground mingling with lingering dread. It's what I'd wanted, needed, but the aftermath was murky. Every choice promises something and claims another. Victory and loss are cousins, entwined, sometimes indistinguishable from each other. I thought about the faces of those I'd left behind, the inevitable disappointment swimming in their eyes, the efforts to pull me back, to reshape my steps into the familiar path. Would they miss me? Would the absence I left be a chasm or just a gentle breeze, felt briefly before it was forgotten? It was a gamble I took knowingly. Sitting down, knees brought up to my chin, I tried to count out the pros and cons like one might inventory the remains after a storm. A new sense of self flickered warmly within, a fragile thing I clutched like a candle in a gust. Yet, beneath it, loneliness stretched out its arms, ready to claim the space I had cleared. This act of defiance, I tasted freedom in it, and a pang of regret too. There'd be conversations, interventions possibly, hell-bent on untangling the strands of their narrative from mine. But their web was tight, and I was air slipping through. The fear was real, a living shadow, but conviction walked beside it. There's an unspoken understanding amongst those who insist on their own truth. It's isolating and liberating in the same breath. I exhaled shakily, feeling the whisper of possibility ripple my skin. In the back of my mind, as a final nod to the life that was no longer mine, I heard echoes of laughter, snippets of conversations that once defined me. They were marked by affection, yet shackled in expectation. Here, in this new quiet, I listened for my own voice, already on a new frequency where only I could hear it. The night deepened, and I leaned back against the wall, spine pressing into the steady support. Tomorrow would demand answers, reasons, perhaps even resolve. But for tonight, I let the uncertainty keep me company, a presence as tangible as the freedom that awaited me beyond the dawn. I've been living in this suffocating silence for days now, each one a blur of numb repetition. The silence is thick, almost physical, a persistent backdrop to my mental static. Every atom in the apartment feels on edge, taut as a wire. My phone, always in my peripheral vision, lies there untouched since the last bitter exchange. I can't bring myself to face the onslaught I know will eventually come. Even in this quiet, their presence is insidious, creeping into my thoughts unbidden. Memories of loud arguments, all those furtive accusations that seeped under my skin and made me question everything. But now, surrounded by this precarious silence, I'm defiant. I let the ringing in my ears replace their voices. Then, the silence shatters. The phone's chime slices through the air, sharp and unwelcome. A message blinks on the screen, their number burning into my retinas. My stomach flips, a familiar, electric dread welling up. I sit there, staring at it like it might explode, my fingers twitching with trepidation. With a deep breath, I tap open the message. Each word hits me like a sucker punch. "How could you do this to us?" it starts. The words seem to seep from the screen like poison, twisting into a coil around my heart. "Do you know what you've put us through?" The accusations unfurl, familiar yet always abrasive. The more I read, the tighter the coil becomes. I'm drowning in it. Their disappointment and anger venomous, but oh so predictable. I pause, wanting to stop reading, but I'm caught in their web again. I can almost hear their voices, the sharp edge of my father's tone, the quiver of my mother's. Each line is crafted perfectly, designed to pierce right through my defenses. It's as if they've written a script, perfectly honed to burrow under my skin, leveraging familiar guilt to steer me back to their grasp. But another part of me holds strong, buoyed by the stubborn resilience I've nurtured in these last days of solitude. I refuse to let the cascade of blame undo the fragile armor I've been trying to build. I draw a breath, let it fill me up with resolve, pushing out the doubt and fear. Their words lash out from the screen. I remind myself silently, as if anchoring in this simple truth. They're trying to pull me back under, into a sea of old patterns and manipulation. But I hold firm, letting each breath ground me, mingling defiance with the fear. I won't let this break me. I type back slowly, fingers forming words with deliberate care, words they don't expect. I need space. I write, each letter a small testament to the boundaries I'm trying to carve out. Please respect that. Hitting send is like releasing a live wire. The air around me seems to buzz as everything dials down to wait for their next move. Yet all I feel now is a tentative, creeping sense of release. For once, I've drawn a line. I crafted my reply with the precision of a surgeon, cutting away the vestiges of their control with words dipped in newfound strength. The room was a silent witness to my resolve. Its familiar walls had heard my silent screams and held my echoed fears. Now they listened as my fingers flew across the keyboard, steady and unyielding. Each keystroke a heartbeat, each word a testament to the woman I'd become. I paused, fingers hovering above the keys, letting the moment stretch. The cursor blinked at me impatiently, like it knew this was more than just an email. This was liberation. The air seemed thicker, electric with the gravity of my actions. My breath was shallow, but there was a clarity to my thoughts that had been absent before. This wasn't just about walking away. It was about stepping into something entirely new, something without the shadows that had followed me for too long. I thought of their reaction, not with the dread I once might have felt, but with curiosity. Would they be incredulous? Would they scoff? underestimate the finality I now clutched tightly in my hand? A small, fierce part of me didn't care. I imagined their face, the inevitable flash of surprise, and for once, the thought didn't crush me. It emboldened me. The reply was succinct, each sentence a reflection of boundaries redefined. It wasn't just a refusal. It was a declaration, an insistence on self-worth unfurling like a flag of a newly independent state. As I typed, my muscles began to loosen, the tension rolling off in waves that left a sense of weightlessness behind. My own words felt foreign yet familiar, like a song I'd forgotten, but somehow knew every note. With a final deep breath, I hit send. The whoosh of the departing message felt almost surreal, like the click of a lock tumbling into place. Silence settled around me, profound and expectant. I'd carved a new path with my words and now stood at its threshold, no longer tethered by the what-ifs or might-have-beens. I wanted to laugh and cry all at once. The enormity of the moment washed over me, sweeping away the remnants of doubt. In its wake was a quiet peace, an assurance that I was worth more than the sum of my fears and past mistakes. Leaning back in my chair, I let my eyes close, breathing deeply, feeling a new chapter unfurling inside me. I opened my eyes to the sunlight filtering through the window, and for the first time, it felt like a kind of welcome, a reassurance that the world hadn't stopped because I had dared to change. I was still here, still moving forward, and in that realization was a power I'd never truly believed I could wield. I watched the early morning light creep through the slats of the blinds, casting stripes across the floor that stretched and bent as the sun rose higher. Sitting there, with a cup of coffee cradled in my hands, I marveled at the stillness that surrounded me. The world outside was waking up, but inside, it was just me, wrapped in a kind of silence that no longer felt oppressive. Instead, for the first time, the silence felt like a friend, an ally in my solitary world, promising that I would be all right. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dew and the faint, distant hustle from the city beginning to stir. I took a deep breath and felt a calmness settle in my chest, like a soft, reassuring weight. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the bitter warmth as it washed over my tongue, each swallow a small triumph in my newfound sovereignty. There'd been a time when such quiet moments terrified me, when the absence of noise was filled with 1,000 thoughts clamoring for attention, each one sharper, more insistent than the last. Back then, I fought against it, filled every second with distractions, anything to dull the roar of regrets and doubts. But now it's different. Now, I have a choice, and that choice has brought a clarity I didn't know was possible. As I sat there, lost in the play of shadows and light, I could almost physically feel the weight of my past choices lifting, like a dense fog finally dispersing. Yes, those choices had a cost, one I wouldn't soon forget. They carved deep lines into my life's terrain, lines I'll carry with me always. But they also granted me freedom, the kind of freedom that comes from embracing your own power, stepping back from the edge and into the light of your own strength. The cost was high, no doubt. Nights punctuated by thoughts of what could have been, echoes of voices that once filled this space. Yet, the absence of those familiar echoes was starting to soothe rather than haunt me. I had learned to embrace it, to find peace where I once found only grief. I stood up, placing the empty cup on the windowsill. The sun was fully up now, flooding the room with a brightness that felt almost foreign but welcome. I gazed out the window, at the world coming to life beyond my small sanctuary. It wasn't perfect, it was still mine, in all its scarred, imperfect glory. With a deep, steadying breath, I stepped into the light, knowing that whatever came next was a road I'd built for myself, a testament to choices made, for better or worse. And in that moment, standing there with the future uncertain but the present moment deeply mine, I felt a quiet sort of relief. For now, that was enough. The last few rays of the sun slipped away, casting the room into a soft, shadowed relief, and I found myself standing by the open window. The air was crisp, carrying a promise of autumn, tinged with the earthy aroma of falling leaves. As I stood there, the weight I had carried for so long began to dissolve, like fog burned away by the morning light. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the cool breeze whisper across my skin, hinting at change. The echoes of a lifetime of obligations loomed large in my mind, shadows of what was expected, what was imposed. The responsibilities and sacrifices I had shouldered like a too-heavy coat were slipping away, one by one, like strands of an old, fraying rope. I thought back to the conversations, the tension simmering just beneath the pleasantries, the unspoken rules that dictated each interaction. I could feel the ghosts of words unsaid pressing against me, the weight of paths untaken. But now, for the first time in forever, there was space to breathe deeply, to exist without the relentless press of past promises. In the distance, I heard the faint chatter of neighbors returning home, carried on the wind as they shared stories of their day. It was a reminder of a world that existed beyond my little orbit, not bound by the same shackles. A world waiting, as unexplored and vast as the darkening sky overhead. I let the thought expand, filling me with a cautious anticipation. What would it mean to step past the threshold of the familiar, to walk towards a horizon undefined by what others expected of me? As I opened my eyes, the horizon, now a tapestry of purples and pinks, hues of redemption as if nature herself offered a silent benediction, whispered in answer. I turned away from the window, feeling the solid floor beneath my feet, grounding me in this moment of new beginnings. The room was simple, unadorned by the paraphernalia of history, yet in its simplicity, it offered a canvas ready to be painted with new experiences, untouched by previous burdens. I can do this, I whispered to myself, the sound barely louder than the rustling leaves. For the first time, belief echoed the words, not doubt. There was no grand plan, no meticulously carved path. Just the promise of tomorrow, free from yesterday's constraints. Stepping away from the window, I moved through the room, feeling lighter with each step. Pictures on the mantel seemed to smile, acknowledging the shift, the release. I knew that life's challenges would remain, but they'd be mine, selected, embraced, and not imposed. That realization alone was empowering. Outside, the last glimmer of sunlight slipped below the horizon, and with it, the shadows faded. As I stepped forward, a sense of freedom wrapped around me, warm and reassuring. The future was not a defined point on the map, but an open road. I was ready to walk it,